Well, the Honourable Lady's constituents will be greatly affected by that project that she mentioned, and also by the performance of Great Western Rail at the moment, which is not sufficient. The Office of Rail and Road has launched an investigation into poor train punctuality and reliability in the Network Rail Wales and Western region, and we await the recommendations of that review. But I would also add that industrial action has affected that.
Sir Michael Fabricus.
Will my honourable friend join me in congratulating Network Rail and their subcontractors for completing the repair works on the longest wooden rail bridge in Europe across the Malddach estuary in Gwynedd?
Minister.
I certainly will. I'm delighted that my honourable friend takes such keen interest in Welsh rail infrastructure and raises it here on such a regular basis. But he is absolutely right to flag that. That is an example of this government's record investment in rail infrastructure in Wales. I was pleased to go and visit that project and pleased to give it my full support.
Chris Elmore.
Number 6, sir.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 6 and 8 together. The government is investing £500 million to secure the future of steelmaking in Port Talbot for generations to come. It is one of the largest UK government support packages in history for steelmaking, and it will protect thousands of jobs, 5,000 jobs directly with Tata and many thousands more in the supply chain.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week in the steel debate, the Secretary of State said he understands, and I quote, the devastation that people will feel in Port Talbot and in the whole community who face the job losses at the plant and beyond. Why is it then that the Secretary of State, or indeed the Business Secretary, didn't put in a red line over job losses while this work was done, especially with Tata this morning doubling down on those losses in the Welsh Affairs Select Committee? It's nothing short of a disgrace.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, Tata approached the UK government and said they were intending to pull out of the United Kingdom. If Tata had pulled out completely from the United Kingdom, it would immediately have cost 8,000 jobs and many thousands more in the supply chain. The government therefore acted to take the only deal which was available, which was to build the electric arc furnace and save thousands of jobs.
Alex Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think there are thousands of jobs going to be saved at all. The people of Teesside who saw the Tory government abandon them and end Virgin steelmaking at Redcar, leading to the loss of 3,000 jobs there, will sympathise with their colleagues in Wales. The failure of the same government will see Virgin steelmaking also ended in Wales with the loss of another 3,000 jobs and leave the UK even more reliant on imports, surrendering the market to other countries. Why would the government want to do that when steel is a foundation industry and, with the introduction of new technologies, could have a bright future?
Secretary of
Well,
State.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the honourable gentleman will be aware that 100% of the materials, the iron ore and the coke, which are used to produce steel in Port Talbot, are being imported from abroad, whereas at the same time we're exporting 8 million tonnes of scrap steel, which means that actually building an arc furnace to make use of that scrap steel is making us less dependent on other countries for our steel. And as far as the job losses are concerned, Mr. Speaker, the UK government have put aside a budget of £80 million combined with £20 million from Tata to support anyone who loses their jobs. Thus far, Mr. Speaker, we have not had one single penny towards that from the Welsh Labour government, who are, by the way, able to find £100 million to create a whole load of extra Senedd members in Cardiff Bay. I know where my priorities are, Mr. Speaker. It's with the steel workers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Steelmaking is essential to our national security, as is reaching net zero. The problem is the Welsh Labour government can't make its mind up which is more important. After trying to kill off the steel industry with their green measures, they're now complaining this government isn't doing enough to support it. Does the honourable gentleman think that they don't really know their ACAS from their Nalgo?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman makes a very good point, but I would also say that the government have looked very carefully at this. There is very little steel being produced by Port Talbot going into the defence industry, but the defence industry is being supplied with steel from an electric arc furnace by Sheffield Forgemasters, and there's absolutely no reason why an electric arc furnace built at Port Talbot, using support from the UK government, cannot help support our defence industry in years to come.
Emma Hardy.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have regular discussions with ministerial colleagues on a range of topics, including on justice matters. The government is committed to supporting victims. By 2025, we will have quadrupled funding in England and Wales for victim and witness support service from 2010 levels.
Emma Hardy.
Mr. Speaker, 9 in 10 crimes went unsolved in Wales in the last 6 months. What does the Minister say to the victims of the 82,000 unsolved crimes?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would point to this government's record on crime. Last week's Office of National Statistics crime survey shows drops in all major crime types, an average reduction of around 50%. Violent crime is down 51%, neighbourhood crime is down 48%, and theft is down 46%. That's due in part to the fact that this government has met its commitment to provide 20,000 extra police officers, and my own force, David Powis, has now got an extra 143 officers.
Robin Miller.
Question 11.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I have regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues and delivery teams in DLUC on the progress of Levelling Up Fund projects in Wales, and I look forward to hearing more about the projects which are taking place in the honourable gentleman's constituency.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Moray Mynydd sea to mountain active travel route in the Conwy Valley received an £18.6 million boost through Levelling Up funds, and the project will make a positive difference to communities in Glanconwy, in Betws-y-Coed and Trefrw. Apart from unlocking the Conwy Valley to visitors, it will help young people get to school safely and workers to their jobs. Now, I meet regularly with Conwy Council on progress on those projects. What is my right honourable friend doing to ensure that Levelling Up funds are being delivered effectively in Wales?
Mr. Speaker, can I firstly congratulate my honourable friend for being such a champion of Levelling Up Fund schemes in his own constituency. The Levelling Up funds have allowed us to commit to keep our post-Brexit promise to ensure that Wales continues to be generously funded. And Mr. Speaker, it is one of many such projects, such as the Levelling Up funds, the free ports and investment zones that are ensuring Wales levels up.
Morris.
Like the towns and villages I represent, coalfield communities in Wales are still bearing the brunt of deindustrialisation. I'm delighted that we're going to have a debate tomorrow on miners and mining communities, and I encourage Welsh colleagues to attend. Can the Minister tell us what steps he's taking to ensure that levelling up funding in Wales and across the coalfields in the UK is targeted the most deprived, left behind areas that have suffered most?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to say that we do need to target the areas most in need, but that is exactly what this government has been doing. And it's not just been about levelling up funds, Mr. Speaker. We have had 4 growth deals going on across the length and breadth of Wales, 3 rounds of levelling up funding. We've had 2 investment zones, 2 free ports, an electrified rail line in North Wales and an electrified arts field in South Wales. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that while we are committed to levelling up, the Welsh Labour government are committed to levying further taxes on people and businesses in Wales.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I say that recent exchanges have been lively to the point where it's becoming difficult for colleagues to hear what is being said clearly, and there has been an escalation in unhelpful exchanges across the floor of the House from sedentary positions and the attempted use of props. Some of the language used in questions has also fallen short of the standards and good temper and moderation that should characterise the proceedings of this House. I know there is a general election approaching, but I would urge honourable members on both sides of the House to exercise greater self-restraint in their choice of words and in their general behaviour, both when they are asking a question and when they are not. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Joanna Cherry.
Number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday I met the families of Grace O'Malley Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates, who were killed in Nottingham. I assured them that we would do whatever it takes to get the answers that they want. And Mr. Speaker, following constructive dialogue over past months, I welcome the significant steps the DUP have taken to make restoration of the executive possible. I also thank the other political parties in Northern Ireland for the patience that they have shown. After 2 years without an executive, there is now the prospect of power sharing back up and running, strengthening our union, giving people the local accountable government that they need, and offering a brighter future for Northern Ireland. My right honourable friend, the Northern Ireland Secretary, will be making a statement shortly. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last week I met with a constituent who was employed not by the post office but by a supermarket who operated a franchise post office. She was wrongly accused of dishonesty as a result of the faulty Horizon system, and she was put through a disciplinary process by her employers, the supermarket. This has had a very profound impact on her life. She's not alone, there are others in her position, and yet there's no provision for compensating people who worked in franchise post offices like her. Will the Prime Minister give me a commitment to include these victims in the Horizon scandal compensation scheme?
Minister.
Well, first of all, can I say I'm very sorry to hear about the Honourable Lady's constituent's case. As I've said, this was an awful miscarriage of justice, and everyone affected deserved not just justice but also compensation and answers. I'll make sure that we look into the precise details of her constituent's case, and surely there will be others like that, and make sure that the Minister gets back to her with all due haste.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Sustainable aviation fuel plays a significant part in the sector's decarbonisation. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, commit to further policies for a SAF mandate to generate greater demand, for a revenue support mechanism such as other sectors, solar and wind power generation as well, and so that work starts by the end of next year on the 5 promised sustainable aviation plants here in the UK?
Prime Minister.
I can give my honourable friend the assurance that we are committed to ensuring the SAF mandate will be in place by 2025. And by mandating the use of sustainable aviation fuel, not only will we be able to deliver carbon savings, but also create a brand new UK market. And as one of the steps in introducing the revenue certainty mechanism that he talks about by 2026, DfT will be consulting in the spring this year on options for how that should work in practice.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in welcoming the DUP statement about the return of the Northern Ireland Executive? This is an important moment, and we now need all sides to work together to get Stormont back up and running for the people of Northern Ireland. Mr Speaker, I too met the families of Grace, Barnaby and Ian on Monday, and it's impossible to express in words the horror that they've been through and continue to go through, and we must all redouble our efforts to do everything that we can to help them with their campaign. And of course, Mr Speaker, this week 2 young lives, 16-year-old Max and 15-year-old Mason, were taken in Bristol, and I know the whole House will join me in sending condolences to their families and their friends. Mr Speaker, one of the most difficult experiences for any member of this House is speaking to those at the sharp end of this government's cost of living crisis. So nobody could fail to be moved by the plight of the member for Mid Norfolk. His mortgage has gone up £1,200 a month. He's been forced to quit his dream job to pay for it. A Tory MP counting the cost of Tory chaos. After 14 years, have we finally discovered what they meant when they said, "We're all in this together"?
Well, Mr Speaker, thanks to the mortgage charter that the Chancellor introduced last year, millions of mortgage holders across the country are benefiting from support with their mortgages, because it's important, rather than take the approach that the Honourable Gentleman just did, is actually focus on the practical support in place to help people who do need help. And someone on a typical mortgage is able to now save hundreds of pounds thanks to those reforms. And actually what we have recently seen is mortgage applications now at a multi-month high as a result of confidence returning. But if he really cared about helping people with the cost of living, Mr Speaker, he would actually do more to celebrate and acknowledge the fact that thanks to our plan, millions of working people will now start to pay hundreds of pounds less in tax from this month's pay slips, Mr Speaker. But we all know that's not a priority for him. He said he wanted to back people with the cost of living, but now he has described tax cuts, I read, as salting the earth. His shadow chancellor, it seems, is equally confused. In Davos, she said she did back tax cuts, but back here in Westminster, she called them a scorched earth policy. she obviously can't decide which Wikipedia page to copy this week.
Mr. Speaker, for every £2 he says he's giving people back, he's taking £10 out of their back pocket in higher tax, and he thinks they should be dancing in the street and thanking him. There are 200,000 people, Prime Minister, just like the member for Mid-Norfolk, coming off fixed-rate mortgages and paying more each and every month because they crashed the economy. Does the Prime Minister actually know how much their monthly repayments are going up by?
Prime Minister. As I said, Mr. Speaker, someone on a typical mortgage of about £140,000 with 17 years left is currently paying around £800 as a result of the ability to extend their mortgage term or switch to a 6-month-only interest-only mortgage. They will be able to save hundreds of pounds, and that is someone on the average mortgage, Mr. Speaker. But again, Mr. Speaker, he says he cares about the cost of living. The thing that would have the biggest impact on everyone's cost of living is the fact that his ideas to spend £28 billion, which we had just confirmed this morning by a Shadow Treasury Minister, I heard, confirmed that they remain committed to them, but he has no plan to pay for this £28 billion, Mr. Speaker. No plan at all. And that's typical Labour economics, because they want to keep the spending but drop the payment plan. And I actually saw at the weekend their former leader, his mentor, was clear that they'll make their sums add up with tax rises on people's assets. Their homes, their pensions and their businesses. It's the same old Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. No plan and back to square one with higher taxes.
Mr. Speaker, they've crashed the economy, mortgages are through the roof, they've doubled the debt, and he thinks he can stand there and lecture other people about fiscal responsibility. But he didn't answer the question. Hundreds of thousands of people are coming off fixed-rate mortgages and facing huge mortgage increases. And the Prime Minister won't even do them the courtesy of answering the question. No, he didn't. So I'll ask him again.
I was very clear at the beginning, and I mean that my constituents to hear it. If yours don't, please leave. Keir Starmer.
Does the Prime Minister have any idea how much mortgages are going up by this month for those coming off fixed-rate mortgages?
Prime Minister. Well, again, I'll just point him back to my previous answer, Mr. Speaker, as I went him through. Everyone's situation will be different. As someone on a typical mortgage of around £140,000, who's currently paying £800, will be able to keep their mortgage payment essentially the same by using the facilitations that the Chancellor has put in place. But again, that's what we've done to help people, Mr. Speaker. But again, it's incumbent on him to explain to the British public how his policy of decarbonising the grid by 2030 is going to be funded. He won't give the answers, but helpfully, the Shadow Energy Secretary popped up at the weekend in an interview in the Sunday Times. He said they don't need a plan to pay for it, Mr. Speaker, because in his words, it will produce real savings and it makes clear economic sense. Now, the Shadow Leader here doesn't want to talk about it at all, but let me tell him, I see all these years later, it's the same story. The Right Honourable Member for Doncaster North has carved a promise in stone, and everyone else just looks away in embarrassment.
Mr. Speaker, he just doesn't get it. They crashed the economy, mortgages skyrocketing, doubling the debt. They say they're going to max out the government's credit card at the next budget, and he won't.
Order. I think the Chief Whip's getting very carried away. He doesn't want to lead everybody for a cup of tea, does he? Come on.
They have forfeited the right to be lecturing others about the economy. Somebody coming off a fixed-rate mortgage is going to be paying an average of £240 more each and every month. A constant reminder that working people are paying the price for the damage that they've done to the economy. This week, I met one of the employees at Iceland in Warrington, Phil. I'm sure Phil would be...
Order. Mr Gibson. Sorry. Mr Starmer. Order. The same voice keeps appearing again. It won't appear anymore. So I'm just letting you know now. Keir Starmer.
laughing at an employee at Iceland who's struggling with his mortgage. Shame. He told me that his mortgage is going up by a staggering £1,000 a month, Prime Minister. He doesn't want other averages, other people, other stories. That's what's happening to him. If the member for Mid Norfolk on £120,000 can't afford this Tory government, how on earth can people like Phil?
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the management of the economy, Phil and millions... I think Phil and millions of people like him are now ensuring that inflation is less than half of the rate that it was when we were talking a year ago, putting more money in their pocket. And thanks to this government, Phil and millions of other workers, not just at Iceland, but across the country, are benefiting this month in their pay packet for a tax cut worth hundreds of pounds for someone on an average salary. But I hope he explained to Phil the cost of his policies. Did he explain to Phil how Phil is going to have to pay for his £28 billion green spending spree? How it's going to cost Phil in higher taxes, more coming out of his pay packet? And did he explain to Phil that he'd be better off sticking with our plan rather than going back to square one with him?
I would invite the Prime Minister to get in touch with Phil and explain to him how paying £1,000 more on his mortgage is making him better off, because that's not how he feels. He's just so out of touch. It's unbelievable. Finding hundreds of pounds extra a month, that may not seem like a big deal to the Prime Minister. But let me tell him, most people don't have that sort of money knocking around. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, this week he told every council in the country to put their council tax up by the maximum of 5%. That's 26 tax rises now, Prime Minister. And he says everything's fine, people are better off. But when people see their mortgages going up, their council tax going up, food prices still going up, who does he expect them to believe? His boasts or their bank account?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I was puzzled because, again, he resorts, as always, to the politics of envy here. But after recently and repeatedly attacking not just me but the government for lifting the bonus cap, I was genuinely surprised to see that the Shadow Chancellor just today has announced that she now supports the government's policy on the bankers' bonus cap. I don't know if he mentioned that to Phil when he was having a chat with him, but I'm sure he can fill us in. But I can tell him that trust and economic credibility come from sticking to a plan. But it's becoming clear you cannot trust a word that he says. And again, when the Shadow Chancellor says or claims that they won't borrow much, they won't raise Phil's taxes, we now know that those promises simply, again, they just aren't worth the Wikipedia page they were copied from.
Mr. Speaker, I actually didn't expect him to be laughing at Phil. I did not expect him to be laughing at Phil, not addressing...
Order. Look, I made this statement very clear. I don't... Prime Minister, it's very serious that we make sure that people hear, both you and the Leader of the Opposition. It matters to the people who watch the proceedings of this chamber, and it's not good in the behaviour that seems to be carried out. Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister just doesn't get how hard it is for millions of people across the country like Phil. That is the primary problem, struggling with their mortgages, their bills, the spiralling cost of living. And the Prime Minister's response is never to take responsibility, show contrition, or even any level of basic understanding. He's so detached, he thinks he can paint a world in which their problems simply don't exist. The problem is he can't even fool his own MPs, let alone anyone else. The member for Mid Norfolk says he's exhausted. He's looking forward to new opportunities outside of Parliament. Why doesn't the Prime Minister do him a favour, call an election, so he and the whole country can move on?
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. But whether it's Phil, whether it's everyone else across the country, the plan that we're putting in place is working to help people, and we're making progress. Just this week, taking action to stop children from vaping. Just this week, ensuring that people can visit their pharmacies to get the healthcare they need, freeing up millions of GP appointments. And just this week, millions of working people starting to see hundreds of pounds of tax cuts delivered in their pay packet, Mr. Speaker. That is a plan that is working. All he's offering is £28 billion of tax rises. And that is the choice, Mr. Speaker. It's a brighter future with us or back to square one with them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister likes to attend live sport, and so I wonder whether he would join me in welcoming the decision of the Planning Inspector in upholding Rugby Council's rejection of an application for development at Brandon Stadium in my constituency to keep the doors open for it to remain a sporting venue so that future generations will enjoy the thrills and spills of motorcycle speedway and stock cars.
Prime Minister. Well, I join my honourable friend in paying tribute and being proud of actually Britain's rich history in the automotive and motorsport sectors, and the stadium that he talks about is a historic motorsport venue, and whilst it's been a shame to see it fall into disrepair, I hope that the decision he refers to enables a possibility of both speedway and stock car racing to return, and I know that my honourable friend will rightly continue to champion this cause.
SNP Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, when the Tories scrapped the cap on bankers' bonuses in the autumn during a cost of living crisis, the Labour Party rightly opposed it. Yet here we are, just 3 months later, and the Labour Party support scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses. Shameful. But is the Prime Minister comforted by the fact that he's now no longer alone in this House on being completely out of touch with public opinion?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the time, we supported the decision of the independent regulator because this was the right thing for financial stability. But that, Mr. Speaker, is because on this side of the House, we have a set of convictions and we have a plan and we stick to it. But he's absolutely right to point out the flip-flopping and U-turning and no convictions of the party opposite.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses was only made possible due to Brexit. So what the Westminster parties are now telling the public is that it's OK for bankers to have unlimited Brexit bonuses, but for the public sitting at home, struggling to feed their families, they have to suck up and deal with the additional food price costs as a result of Brexit red tape. That is the cost, and that is the reality of broken Brexit Britain. Isn't it the case that the great achievement of this Tory government is getting the Labour Party to agree to that bleak future?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're actually delivering benefits for people across Scotland, not just least in new free trade deals that are opening up markets for Scottish exporters, free ports that are attracting jobs and investment, the Brexit pubs guarantee, cutting the cost of a pint in Scottish pubs. But when he talks about the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, the thing that he could do most to help is make sure that Scotland isn't the highest tax part of the United Kingdom. And it's not just for high earners, Mr. Speaker. Everybody earning £28,500 or more is paying more tax in Scotland than they would in England, thanks to the SNP.
Ian Davison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 punch thrown, 2 days on life support, then 3 children left without a father. A 4-year sentence handed down, released after 2, but 1 grieving mother has to live a life sentence of agony. Sentencing for one-punch killers is not working in this country. Does the Prime Minister agree that now is the time to finally introduce a specific offence and a tougher minimum sentence for one-punch manslaughter?
Prime Minister.
I pay tribute to the work my honourable friend has done in bringing attention to so-called one-punch manslaughter and highlighting, as she knows well, the anguish those cases cause for the families of the victims. And I know the Ministry of Justice has looked very carefully at the amendment that my honourable friend has proposed, and I know that she'll be meeting the Minister for Safeguarding shortly to both discuss her specific amendment and how we might best address the wider issue.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker.
Order. Ed Davey.
My constituent Millie, a wheelchair user, had a serious accident at a sporting event. Millie was left waiting on the floor in pain for over 2 hours before an ambulance arrived. During her months in hospital since, she's been dropped badly multiple times, left stuck in her bed for days at length. She's even been told to soil herself when there's no one to take her to the toilet. Before all this, Millie was living independently and working, but the prospect of her returning to work is being destroyed by the crisis in the NHS and care system. I'm sure the Prime Minister will agree that no one should ever have to go through what Millie has. So will he look again at our proposals to make sure every patient gets the high-quality care they need?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about Millie's case, and if there are specific aspects of it that need to be examined, I'm sure the Health Secretary will follow up with the honourable gentleman. And more generally, we want to make sure everyone gets the care they deserve, which is why we're not just investing record sums in the NHS, but ensuring that there are record numbers of doctors, nurses, and new innovative forms of treatment like surgical hubs and virtual wards, all of which is showing that ambulance times that he mentioned are lower today than they were this time last year.
Saxby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The #1 reason for children's hospital admissions in North Devon is for dental treatment. We have no NHS capacity and no orthodontist in Barnstable. Our dentists cannot recruit, even with large golden hellos. The emergency dental plan does seem to have been stuck at the Treasury forever. My right honourable friend uses spare set of keys and pop round and rescue it for us, please. My constituents and I would be ever so grateful.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend has rightly championed the provision of dentistry in her local area. We're investing £3 billion a year, and the reformed contracts in dentistry from the NHS have improved access while ensuring fairer remuneration for dentists, and we're also providing more financial support for those who need it the most. So around half of the course of treatment last year were delivered to those who are non-paying, both adults and children. But yes, more needs to be done, and that's why our dentistry recovery plan will be published shortly.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than 2 decades ago, the then Prime Minister Tony Blair misled this House by promoting and endorsing the Post Office Horizon IT system as perfect, protecting the large corporation that created it and causing untold harm and damage and misery to innocent people. Can the current Prime Minister think of anything he has promoted in partnership with huge businesses as safe and effective, which has ultimately harmed the British people? And will he use this opportunity to correct that safe and effective statement, or will he choose the same line as Tony Blair, sit back, do nothing, and let the misery just continue to pile up?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as we've been clear, the Horizon scandal is a terrible miscarriage of justice, and we're doing everything that we can to make it right. To what he was more broadly insinuating, let me be unequivocal from this dispatch box that COVID vaccines are safe, Mr. Speaker.
Jill Gideon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The shocking revelations of the Horizon scandal highlighted the Post Office's financial incompetence, and my right honourable friend will know that the public's confidence in the institution is at an all-time low. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that, as high street banks are closing branches across the country, we should look to developing new community banking solutions rather than giving the Post Office sole responsibility for providing access to cash and other banking services in poorly served neighbourhoods?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for a question, but I also just say that we shouldn't mistake conflating this scandal with the actions of many hard-working local postmasters and sub-postmasters, because customers can access cash and banking services through a wide range of channels, including a contract with the Post Office counter service, which does provide a valuable channel. And that I agree with her, though, the importance of access to cash, which is why the government has legislated to protect that as part of the recent Financial Services and Markets Act, and ensures that the vast majority of people should be no more than 3 miles away from such a cash point.
John Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the Nolan principles, integrity, states that holders of public office should not act to gain material benefits for themselves, their family or their friends. Prime Minister, on the 6th of January, you tweeted a link to the Conservative Party website which seemed to scrape people's data and place unwanted cookies on their machines. The Good Law Project is now pursuing. Can the Prime Minister assure the House that no laws have been broken by his party?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, of course our party follows all laws.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a first responsibility for government is to fix the housing crisis that young people didn't cause. 3 years ago, we dragged house building in this country up to the highest level since 1987, after the last Labour government left it at its lowest level since the 1920s. But house building is weakening. We need to do more. Will my right honourable friend consider using the budget to do as he and I did together during the pandemic and cut stamp duty to boost housing starts, to reignite the economy and to support thousands of businesses across our country?
Prime Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend is right to point out that since 2010 we have delivered 2.5 million additional homes, on track to deliver 1 million just in this Parliament, and help over 850,000 families into home ownership through schemes such as Help to Buy and Right to Buy. Obviously, tax decisions are a matter for the Chancellor, but I would point out that our existing stamp duty relief for first-time buyers ensures the vast majority of first-time buyers in our country pay absolutely no stamp duty.
Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The APPG on eye health and visual impairment has today published polling that found that nearly half of employers exclude blind and partially sighted people from their workplaces, and 1 in 4 said that they would not be willing to make workplace adjustments. The disability employment gap remains stubbornly at 30%, and the pay gap means that blind and partially sighted people effectively work for free for 47 days of the year. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and sight loss organisations to discuss how we can create a more inclusive workforce?
Prime Minister.
Well, I share the honourable lady's ambition to have an inclusive workforce, and the record in supporting those with disabilities into work over the past several years has been incredibly strong. I know this is something that the Work and Pension Secretary is actively looking at and making sure that our accessibility plan is up to date and inclusive, and I'll ensure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Sir Michael Ellis.
Mr. Speaker, having visited recently, I know that Israel remains in shock following the rape, murder and butchery of Hamas. All of us want to see a peaceful and demilitarised Palestinian state. However, Hamas remain in control in large parts of Gaza. Their support is growing in the West Bank. Nearly 2/3 of Palestinians in polling reject coexistence with Israel, and the Palestinian Authority has continued to promote hatred of Jews. Does my right honourable friend agree that any recognition of a Palestinian state must address these issues and can only come about as part of a negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinians?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government's position is clear. My honourable friend is right that there are steps and conditions that need to be put in place on this journey. First and foremost, the removal of Hamas from Gaza, a Palestinian-led government in Gaza and the West Bank, a concrete plan to reform and support the Palestinian Authority, a reconstruction plan for Gaza, and a two-state solution which we have long supported. So let me be clear, we stand with Israel, and the terrorist threat that they face must be limited, and Israel's lasting security must be guaranteed.
Neil Hanby.
Mr. Speaker, on the 15th of November last year, I appealed to the Prime Minister to choose de-escalation and peace over violence, death and destruction. He called me naive. So far, over 26,000 souls have perished in Gaza. Shameful. In a powerful and moving open letter in Monday's New York Times, the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council cited Deuteronomy. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, accusing President Biden of choosing death. If the Prime Minister won't listen to me or the ICJ, will he listen to the Rabbinical Council, or will he call them naive too?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've been clear multiple times that we are concerned, deeply concerned, about the impact of the fighting in Gaza on the civilian population. Too many people have lost their lives, and there is a desperate need for increased humanitarian support in Gaza. I won't go over all the debates we've had about the conditions that are necessary for an immediate pause leading to a sustainable ceasefire, but I can assure the House that we are doing everything that we can to get more aid into the region as quickly as possible.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chatham Docks supports over 800 local high-value jobs which are at risk as the owners are continuing in their pursuit to displace successful businesses such as ArcelorMittal Kent Wire. The Labour Council are failing to honour the commitment they made before the local elections to protect the docks and the jobs. Even their leader, the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras, said he was proudly backing Save Chatham Docks campaign. Will my Right Honourable friend meet with me to see how we can protect the docks and save those jobs for my constituents? And isn't this just another example of how Labour and their leaders change their position depending on which way the wind blows?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has been a constant champion of Chatham Docks, and I am disappointed to hear that the local Labour Council are failing to honour the commitments that they've made. But also, as she points out, I'm not surprised to see that the Leader of the Opposition has said one thing and then consequently done another. The docks support hundreds of jobs, and I join with her in calling on the Council to rethink their approach.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We now come to the statements. Minister Letson.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I would like to make a statement on the launch of our Pharmacy First service. Pharmacies are at the centre of our communities, an accessible front door to our NHS for millions of people. Alongside general practice, optometry and dentistry, pharmacy is one of the 4 pillars that make up primary care in England. And 4 in 5 people in England live within a 20-minute walk of a community pharmacy. They provide fast, fair and simple access to care and advice for the kinds of illnesses that people suffer from every day. Our constituents can now walk in off the high street whenever it suits them, whether they're at home, at work or visiting somewhere. Our pharmacists are not only conveniently located, but they're also highly skilled professionals with years of training under their belts. The numbers of registered pharmacists in England has grown considerably under this Conservative government, up 61% compared to 2010. But these skilled healthcare professionals still represent a rather untapped resource in our NHS. So this government is bringing forward reforms that will make the most of their expertise, giving people up and down the country a variety of quality care and wise advice quickly and easily, saving them a trip to their GP, freeing up appointments for patients who need GPs most, and driving our plan to cut waiting lists. The benefits are very clear, and that's why this government has consistently taken the decisions that allow community pharmacists to deliver more clinical services and supply more treatments. Whether that be other parts of the NHS referring patients suffering from minor illnesses to community pharmacies for advice and the sale of over-the-counter medicines, or whether it's offering life-saving blood pressure checks in pharmacies, or whether it's making it easier for women to access oral contraception in pharmacies. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud of everything we've accomplished so far. But to unlock our pharmacists' full potential, we need to go further and faster. That's why I'm delighted to inform the House today that we're launching the Pharmacy First service, a personal priority for the Prime Minister, himself the son of a pharmacist. This will give pharmacists the power to supply prescription-only medications, including antibiotics and antivirals, for 7 common conditions: sore throats, earaches, infected insect bites, impetigo, shingles, or minor urinary tract infections in women. More than 10,000 community pharmacies have signed up. That's over 95% of pharmacies in England, which is a brilliant sign of their approval. So next time they're suffering from any of these conditions, most people's first port of call can be a quick trip or a call to their pharmacist. They won't need to see their GP first, they won't need to spend time making an appointment, and they can turn to their pharmacist whenever it suits them. This benefits everyone involved. People get the care they need faster, GPs can focus on more complicated cases, and pharmacists can make better use of their knowledge and skills. This is a common sense reform. Pharmacists see and advise people with these sorts of conditions every day, but we've now enabled them to provide prescription-only medicines where clinically appropriate, so they can help people more easily. And it will all deliver results. So Pharmacy First will make it easier for millions of people to get the care they need on the high street. And together with the expanded blood pressure and contraception service, it will free up as many as 10 million GP appointments. In turn, reducing unnecessary trips to A&E, reducing the pressure on GPs, and driving forward our plan to cut waiting lists for patients. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the investment we're putting into Pharmacy First will also level up digital infrastructure in community pharmacies up and down the country, streamlining referrals to and from GPs, giving pharmacists better access to relevant information from patients' GP records, and allowing them to quickly share relevant information in return. Pharmacy First isn't just about delivering care faster, but it can also make care fairer by driving down health inequalities, because there are double the number of pharmacies in the most deprived communities in our country. So getting the right care, the right contraception and the right test will now be faster and simpler for all those people in our more deprived communities than it ever has been before. Thanks to Pharmacy First, they will be able to take full advantage of their pharmacists' expertise and use them to complement the care they receive from their GP and throughout the NHS. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, Pharmacy First was only made possible through close collaboration with Community Pharmacy England, and I really want to thank them for all the work they've done and will continue to do to support community pharmacies to gear up and deliver this new service for our NHS. Madam Deputy Speaker, we on this side of the House have a clear plan for the NHS, getting patients the care they need faster, making the system simpler for staff, and making it fairer for everyone. That is our plan, and I look forward to working with pharmacists up and down the country to deliver today's announcements as we build a brighter future for families right across the country, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Preet Kaur Gill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement. Let me start by paying tribute to the many organisations that have been involved in preparing for this launch and the thousands of pharmacies across the country who have embraced this initiative. Labour has long been arguing that pharmacists should play a greater role in the NHS, so we support this move. Pharmacies, as the Minister has said, already do far more than just dispense repeat prescriptions and sell shampoo. They are medicine experts within the NHS, they are highly trained, they are easily accessible right across the country, and as we saw during the pandemic, they are a highly trusted part of their communities. But their skills and knowledge are often underutilised. Therefore, bringing more services to British high streets for patients to get treated more quickly and conveniently is absolutely right. It's why, as we announced last week, we want to bring the NHS outpatient appointments closer to people through high street opticians too. The Minister is right to highlight that pharmacists can take pressure off GPs. However, let's be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, this announcement won't make up for the 1,000 pharmacies which have been closed under the Conservatives or the 2,000 GPs that have been cut since 2015. Patients today are still waiting over a month to see a GP if they can get an appointment at all. And when Labour was last in office, you could get an appointment within 48 hours. That is the thing with this government. It gives with one hand and takes with the other. So can the Minister explain what has happened to the government's pledge to deliver 6,000 more GPs this year? And can she explain what she is doing to support community pharmacies who are already facing a perfect storm of inflationary pressures for running costs, recruitment challenges and an unstable medicines market. Now, the government's press release issued today claims that patients in England will be able to get treatment for 7 common conditions at their high street pharmacy from today. So let's just dig down into whether that is actually the case. Healthwatch England has warned it will take time for pharmacists to get trained to actually provide the services ministers have announced. So can the minister tell us when she will be able to guarantee that the services being advertised are actually going to be available? And let me also ask about IT integration. To facilitate this rollout, pharmacists were supposed to have access to GP Connect so that details of patient consultations would automatically be sent to general practice through the clinical IT systems. The government have had 12 months to get this ready, but from what I'm hearing this morning, this is actually still not live. What pharmacists are telling me, they can only access a summary of GP records. They then have to use another system to input what they've actually prescribed. Then they have to download that and email it across to the GP. That is absolutely cumbersome. So what estimate has the minister made of the time that is going to be wasted at a local level to address this issue? And how long does she think it will take for the system to be actually ready? And finally, longer term, what is the government's plan to integrate the increase in independent prescribers being trained as part of the long-term workforce plan? And does she agree with us that we should be accelerating the rollout of independent prescribing so that we can establish a community pharmacist prescribing service covering the broad range of common conditions? This will support patients with chronic conditions because this is the big challenge facing the NHS. So does she agree that community pharmacy will have an important role to play in supporting GPs in the management of long-term conditions like hypertension, asthma, and in tackling the serious issue of overprescribing, which is responsible for thousands of avoidable hospital admissions every year? Madam Deputy Speaker, we agree that patients should be able to go to their local pharmacy to receive some services that they currently get at their GP surgeries, like vaccinations free of charge on the NHS, with patients seen faster and GPs freed up to see more complex patients. By bringing healthcare into the community, patients will have greater control. And the NHS should be seen as much as a neighbourhood health service as it is as a national health service, with healthcare on your doorstep, there for you when you need it, and with Labour, it will. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the very first appointment under Pharmacy First happened at 8:30 this morning. Or was it 8:31? Thank you, Secretary of State. So when will the services be available? I should think there's many more taking place already. I'm afraid the Honourable Lady, whilst welcoming this, is being a little bit pusillanimous with her praise, because actually a lot of the suggestions she has made, as she will absolutely know, is simply not true. There are already thousands of new GPs, well over 2,000 GPs who are working in our NHS, and many tens of thousands of nurses working in our NHS, many thousands of additional practice staff working in GP practices. And in fact, as she will know, our brilliant GPs have made available 50 million more appointments each year ahead of our target that was set in our manifesto. So good on them. They're doing an amazingly good job. And what this will do, this new Pharmacy First, is to ease the ever-increasing burden on our GPs. She also talks about the technology, and I'm very pleased to tell her that a key part of the decision on when we could go live was to ensure that the technology was in place. There is a very short window where some systems will have elements of manual intervention, but only for a few weeks, and the whole system will be fully automated. It will provide absolutely the ability to inquire into GP records and to swap advice, which is very important for pharmacists to deliver that excellent service that they're already delivering. And finally, she will also know that community pharmacists for some time now have been delivering blood pressure checks, which in some cases are truly life-saving. This is amazing patient access and patient convenience, and I think that the party opposite should for once simply praise it and be glad that this government has stuck to our plan and got on with it.
Therese Coffey.
Thank Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm so pleased to hear this announcement today and that we are delivering. I must admit, in our plan for patients, this was one of the key things I wanted to make sure that happened. And in particular, there are many members in this House, current and past, who have been things like infections, and as a consequence of not dealing with them, have ended up in hospital. And this is a sort of sensible approach, which frankly did meet some resistance from my time at the department, worries about over-prescribing prescriptions, but it's treating pharmacists like proper professionals, but most importantly of all, quicker access to care, necessary care that patients will now properly enjoy.
Minister.
Well, can I say a huge thank you to my right honourable friend for her contribution to kicking this project off. I do feel very fortunate to be here at the dispatch box on the day we launch it because, of course, many others were involved with setting this up in the first place. And my right honourable friend is quite right to highlight some of the problems with spotting things like sepsis, infections, which pharmacists are trained to spot and that really can be the first line of defence. And now being able to walk off the high street into a pharmacist is incredibly valuable to all of us.
Sir George Harth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a long-standing supporter of the idea of pharmacy first, I do welcome the Right Honourable Lady's statement and also welcome the specific reforms she's talked about introducing. She will be aware, however, that pharmacists in my constituency and further afield are very concerned that they're unable to do the job they're already expected to because of lack of capacity and problems in accessing certain drugs that are necessary for them to prescribe. Can she give us some indication of how the problems that already exist are going to be dealt with so that they can then do what is promised for Pharmacy First?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his support for the programme. There are around 14,000 licensed medicines and the vast majority of them are in good supply. The department works very closely with the sector on finding alternatives and on sourcing supplies for medicines, and most of the time we're able to meet that. Occasionally there are challenges, but that doesn't change in any way the ability of community pharmacists to be the expert medicine suppliers that they are and to meet the need for treatments and advice from general members of the public.
James Morris.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I warmly welcome the statement from the Minister? I think this initiative does have the potential to transform primary care and access to treatment. But would she agree with me that in order to realise its full potential, we do need to be investing in new technology? She mentioned digitalisation to make sure that the pharmacies and community pharmacies are set up to take advantage of these new opportunities. And also investment in the pharmacy workforce as part of the government's long-term workforce plan, looking at the alternative roles within pharmacies like pharmacy technicians so that they have the capacity to take the opportunities that she's outlining today.
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Investing in technology, as I've set out, is vital, but so too is investing in the workforce. We've seen an increase of 61% in numbers of registered community pharmacists since 2010, and we have plans in our long-term NHS workforce plan to increase that further by 50%, and we're already increasing places, training places for both pharmacists and pharmacy technicians.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Deputy Speaker. Can I too welcome Pharmacy First? I think it's a very good initiative. But I wanted to raise the fact that in my area, we've seen in recent weeks the closure of 2 pharmacies on Beverley Road and on Champlands Avenue. And I'm also told by leaders in the pharmacy community in the Humber that we have one of the largest numbers of temporary closures because of problems accessing pharmacists. So I wondered whether the Minister might look favourably on an idea that I've got to have a school of pharmacy attached to the Hull and York Medical School. We also need a school of dentistry as well. But if we could have a centre of excellence for the Humber area, it might solve some of these workforce problems that we specifically have.
Well, I'm always happy to speak to colleagues across the House on their ideas for new dental pharmacy schools. It's always an ongoing interest. But to her point about pharmacy closures. In fact, in England, we are blessed with huge numbers, well over 10,000 community pharmacies. And in fact, 4 in 5 of us are able to walk to a community pharmacy within 20 minutes. And in the more deprived areas, the numbers of pharmacies are double that in the more well-off areas. So I think we are very well served by our brilliant pharmacists. And I hope that this Pharmacy First programme is actually going to improve their footfall and improve their value in each of our communities.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I very much welcome this initiative to encourage our pharmacies to provide more frontline healthcare for the population, which the population need to know about, because very often they don't think of their pharmacy. But can I also ask what work the government is doing to look at large population centres like Harwich and Dovercourt, which is over 20,000 people, which have no out-of-hours pharmacy cover. So people have to make a round trip of in excess of 40 miles to collect a prescription on a Sunday, for example. Is there any work going on in the government to look at 24/7 coverage of pharmacy for larger population areas?
Well, my right honourable friend raises an important point, and what I can tell him is that pharmacists will keep their community pharmacy open for up to 72 hours, in most cases some for 100 hours, which does mean weekend accessibility. And it's always something we keep under review, but it actually the availability is very good.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats have long supported calls for Pharmacy First, and the National Pharmacy Association, based in my constituency of St Albans, has been calling for it since at least 2017. So the move is welcome, but it is long, long overdue. The Minister will be aware that since 2015, there have been almost 700 permanent closures of pharmacies, and the CCA now estimates that there's 8 a week that are closing, including one in my constituency. Could the Minister please say what steps she's taking to make sure there are no more closures this week, next week and every other week this year?
Well, the Honourable Lady might remember that the Liberal Democrats were in government for a good part of that period of time. But she talks about pharmacy closures. We do see pharmacies opening and closing. There have been a small number of net closures, but we are very well served across England, and we keep a very close eye on that. But this Pharmacy First is a real new boost to community pharmacies right across England.
Heather Wheeler.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I congratulate my right honourable friend for bringing in this initiative. Really well deserved. I've got fantastic community pharmacies in South Derbyshire. Sadly, when the boundary changes come, I'm going to be losing Hatton to Derbyshire Dales, but they are absolute leaders in their field and so trusted in their communities. So this is a brilliant initiative, and I can't thank my right honourable friend enough. Thank you.
Thank you to my honourable friend.
Order. That was a perfect answer. I have to tell the House that we have a lot of business to get through today, and therefore I'm going to need short questions and admirably short answers. Otherwise, not everyone who's standing will have a chance to ask a question. Barry Sherman.
Deputy Speaker, can I say that I don't agree with most of the things that the Minister said today. We're all in favour of pharmacies. I think this statement today is a distraction away from the real problems in our health service, in our GP service and much else.
Will the honourable gentleman please ask a question?
The question I have is, has she looked at the number of pharmacies that have closed down in the most difficult areas, the poorest areas of our country? And lastly, what's she going to do about people like Boots that have even closed the local Boots in Westminster?
Thank you. Order, order. I allowed the honourable gentleman, because of his seniority, a little more leeway. One question, one answer. Minister.
The more deprived parts of England are much better served with community pharmacies than the better well-off areas.
Dean Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Watford, we have amazing pharmacists, and community pharmacy is something I've been championing in support of organisations like Sigma, a fantastic local business. Can I just get reassurances that the general public will be made massively aware of this new fantastic new service? Thank you.
Yes, there will be a significant communications package beginning today.
Ben Bradford.
She doesn't appear concerned about the record number of community pharmacy closures under this Conservative government. Why does she think it's happening?
There's a 61% increase in registered pharmacists since 2010, with plans to recruit to increase that number by 50% in the next few years.
Rishi Patel.
Deputy Speaker, I commend my friend for her excellent statement, but may I ask her how she will tackle the issue of funding for prescriptions with community pharmacies? They themselves are struggling, and she will understand that the NHS tariff is not actually paying the pharmacies the full price of the products. And is this something that she will look at as she rolls this scheme out?
The government currently contributes £2.6 billion to community pharmacy, quite apart from the £645 million addition for Pharmacy First. We're about to start the negotiations for the 24-25 period.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have 3 pharmacies in Shirley, in part of my constituency. They've all been there for literally decades. They're very well known, very trusted. They are all on the edge of having to close. One of them is using their own savings and not paying themselves wages to kind of keep open. Welcome what you're announcing today. Would you read a letter from them on...
Order, just because at other times there's been lax obeying of rules, would the Honourable Lady please refer to the Minister as she, not you? Please.
Forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker, that was an error. Would the Minister read a letter from them and potentially look at some of those issues, perhaps meet with us to talk about them, because they are good people and we want to keep those open?
I'm of course happy to read the letter, but I would say to her, Pharmacy First offers a significant new boost to community pharmacies.
Timson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend will be pleased to hear that across Cheshire and Merseyside, 535 community pharmacies will be starting the Pharmacy First initiative today, including in my Eddisbury constituency, where particularly in rural areas it's such a lifeline for many people. But can my right honourable friend reassure both patients about the clinical competence of pharmacists to carry out these other prescriptions, but also reassure pharmacists on the issue of clinical liability?
I can assure my honourable friend that pharmacists are highly skilled, higher trained than ever before in this country now, and they are fully equipped to meet the demands of their new prescribing role.
Bedford.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome this Pharmacy First initiative. It's long been overdue to be rolled out, but what expectations are we creating in the minds of patients when they attend pharmacies? Are pharmacists going to be trained in denying some medication when people turn up expecting to be given a prescription of some sort? Because clearly this is going to encourage more people to present in order to get medication than otherwise may be necessary.
The Honourable Gentleman raises a good point. Of course, pharmacists will be prescribing for 7 common conditions. There will be plenty of referrals made to GPs and from GPs to pharmacists to give patients the accessibility but also the appropriate level of assessment of their needs.
Jeremy Quinn.
Pharmacists in Horsham have asked for such a scheme. They will very much welcome it, as certainly do I. But as the Minister is aware from our one-on-one discussions, for which I'm grateful, there are issues of access to pharmacists currently in Horsham. Will she ensure that the sector is appropriately resourced and has the right training to ensure that this is the great success that it deserves to be?
Absolutely, and I'm always happy to discuss it with him further.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank the Minister very much for that answer. In Northern Ireland, we currently run what was the minor ailment scheme, and what is now called Pharmacy First is acknowledging that GPs can spend up to 40% of their time, of their working day, on minor ailments. However, the scale is difficult to what has been proposed in England. Will the capacity, Minister, for this to be rolled out UK-wide to take pressure off our GP services? Because if it does, that's the right thing.
Well, I seriously look forward to the re-establishment of the Stormont Assembly so that it will be possible for Northern Ireland to implement such a scheme themselves.
Robert Buckland.
Deputy Speaker, I warmly welcome the statement. I've been a strong champion of pharmacies in my constituency. We are experiencing challenges, though, when the likes of Boots withdraw services. It's very difficult to transfer or apply for licences, despite the fact we have a number of very keen applicants who want to provide important pharmacy services. What more can the government do to speed up and make that licensing application procedure smoother and better?
I'd love to hear more about that from my right honourable friend, and I'll be happy to look into it.
Mira Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In recent months, Boots has closed 2 out of 3 pharmacies in the Hampton area in my constituency. This has left Hampton North, which is one of the most deprived wards in the London Borough of Richmond, without a single pharmacy, with elderly residents and those with long-term conditions having to walk a lot further than 20 minutes to be able to access a pharmacy. And local GPs tell me it's just not viable to set up a community pharmacy facility. So will the government review the pressures on community pharmacy and look at the community pharmacy contractual framework so that we can make this initiative work and take the pressure off GPs? Well done.
There are, as I've already mentioned, many community pharmacies starting up all the time, as well as closing down. The Honourable Lady will appreciate that the Pharmacy First initiative is a real boost to community pharmacies, and I'm happy to discuss it with her, but I would imagine that there will be the capability to open new community pharmacies in her area.
Can I congratulate my right honourable friend on the front bench for rolling this out? The Island of Portland has did have 2 pharmacies, both run by Boots. One's now shut. Can I meet my honourable friend and the front bench to discuss how we can ensure that deprived areas like Portland retain the pharmacies that they desperately need?
I'll be very happy to meet with him.
Alistair Strathern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With so many constituents in my area waiting a long time to see GPs, any boost to primary care capacity has to be welcomed, and I thank the Minister for today's announcement. But with GPs and pharmacies I'm meeting with raising real concerns about recruiting to open roles at the moment, what assurances can the Minister offer that this won't be, following the childcare announcement, another policy that lacks a workforce or sectoral strategy to really make full the benefits?
Well, as the Honourable Gentleman will know, that our NHS long-term workforce plan intends to increase by 50% the number of registered pharmacists that there are today, and that work is underway now and includes increasing the number of pharmacy technicians too.
Ford.
It's great that people will be able to go to the pharmacy for the prescription as well as the product they need, and thus not need to go to the GP. In Chelmsford, I have some great community pharmacies, but Boots are closing 3 branches. So please will she meet with me to make sure that the people of Chelmsford will be able to get to the pharmacy that they need for this to work.
I'll be very happy to meet with my right honourable friend.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the community pharmacy in Wem, in my constituency, they have struggled to find a full-time pharmacist, relying instead on locums. That means the opening times are erratic, people can't rely on it, and the pharmacy is loss-making because the locums are so expensive. Could the Minister elaborate on how she will help pharmacists in rural areas recruit the full-time pharmacists they need and reduce their reliance on locums?
The Honourable Lady will be aware that community pharmacies are normally private businesses. There's a few owned by GP practice, but on the whole, they're private businesses. We are training the registered community pharmacists that we need, and it will be obviously for that local area to be able to put in place their own recruitment policies, but I'll be happy to meet with her and discuss it further.
Sherilyn McCrory.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement today. And can I put on thanks my thanks to all of the pharmacists that work in my constituency of Truro and Falmouth. Would she agree to meet with me, though? Because given the geography of my constituency, often someone's nearest pharmacy, which is about 1.5 miles away, is across the water, and actually they end up having to drive about 11 miles round to get to that pharmacy. Would she look at the mapping for me, which I believe needs to be changed, but it will take a meeting to do that. Thank you.
Always happy to meet with my honourable friend. Just to let her know, there are 100 pharmacists signed up to Pharmacy First in Cornwall.
Paul Bristow.
This brilliant announcement has the potential to free up many thousands of GP places in places like Peterborough. But this will only be the success we need if more people know about it. She touched on an awareness campaign, but what efforts will she make to ensure that that awareness campaign reaches difficult to reach communities, such as those with English as an additional language?
Well, there will be a big communications plan. Happy to share it with my honourable friend. There are well over 100 community pharmacies in his area who've signed up to Pharmacy First, which is brilliant news. But I do think that it is incumbent on all of us, hence the purpose of the statement today, to make sure our constituents know about this excellent new service.
Michael Fabricant.
Although my right honourable friends and I share a common scepticism about the sclerotic state of the European Union, there are lessons to be learned from Europe, and I'm glad to see that, like France, we're now really respecting community pharmacies. Can I ask, however, one specific question? In her statement, she said that one of the areas where the pharmacy can act is with female urinary tract infections. Why not male?
Well, happy Brexit Day to my honourable friend. I will have to come back to him on that issue. The point is that it is limited to minor urinary tract infections. That might be the reason why not men, but I will certainly get back to him on that point.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Speaker, I, along with many of my constituents, not all of them in Reading, Mead and Weybridge, will very warmly welcome the statement today. My question is about integration with other NHS access services. If an individual was to dial NHS 111 with one of these conditions that I've announced today, would they be diverted to pharmacy or to GP first?
It would actually be to the pharmacy. So 111, GPs and UEC can all refer to pharmacists for those particular common conditions.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I join the welcome for this new scheme. And as part of the communications, will my right honourable friend ensure that the NHS website is updated to show which pharmacies have signed up to Pharmacy First? And will she continue to encourage others that haven't done so far to do so?
Well, what's brilliant is that over 95% of all community pharmacies have signed up, including 172 in his own area.
Nigel Mills.
The key to this service being successful is when patients try it, the pharmacy can actually offer the service when they turn up. So does she know how many actual individual pharmacists have been trained to provide these services? And is there a way of gathering data and publishing when actually pharmacies are offering the service so a patient won't have a frustrated journey and we can see where the gaps are that need filling?
So as I say, more than 95% of all community pharmacies have signed up to the service and all pharmacists have been trained in how to deliver it.
Steve Double.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As someone who has championed the role of community pharmacies throughout my time in this House, I warmly welcome today's statement. I'm particularly delighted that we were able to host one of the pilot schemes in Cornwall that was hugely successful, resulted in 7,500 consultations, which took 6,000 appointments away from GPs and 75 A&E appearances. So would the Minister join me in thanking all the pharmacies in Cornwall who took part in the pilot, which was so successful?
Absolutely. It's only by trying these things that we can see how successful it can be, and I do believe this is going to radically improve patient access to care.
Right, that completes statement. We now come to the next statement. I'll just let the front bench clear. We now come to the statement to call the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to make a statement on Northern Ireland executive formation. This Saturday would mark 2 years without a fully functioning devolved government in Northern Ireland. That's 2 years without locally elected ministers able to take important decisions on Northern Ireland schools, hospitals and the broader economy. And above all, Mr. Speaker, it's 2 years that Northern Ireland has been held back from achieving the massive potential of this unique part of the United Kingdom. It was nearly 2 years ago that the then First Minister resigned over the old Northern Ireland Protocol. The government recognised that the protocol did not deliver to the people of Northern Ireland the same freedoms that leaving the European Union delivered for the rest of the United Kingdom. As the party of the United Kingdom, as the party of the Union, this Conservative government has sought to address these concerns by replacing the protocol with the Windsor Framework. I maintain that the Windsor Framework was and is a good deal for Northern Ireland that addresses the issues around the old protocol and sets out a new way forward. But it alone did not prove sufficient to allow the devolved institutions to function with the cross-community support that is such an essential bedrock of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So, for the last few months, my team and I have been holding discussions with the Northern Ireland political parties on how we could see the return of devolved institutions. Those discussions have been long and necessarily tough. But this is a testament to the patience of all Northern Ireland's political leaders who, as I've seen firsthand, work tirelessly to make sure that Northern Ireland is the most prosperous and safe society that it can be. One of the people I've been talking to the most is the Honourable Member for Belfast East. It's been a pleasure to work with him on these matters, and it's also a pleasure to confirm recently that the government will support his bill that seeks to create a dedicated route to enable Irish nationals who wish to apply for British citizenship. If passed, this legislation would support the close historic and geographical ties between Ireland and the UK, and I commend him for championing this cause. I'm also pleased now to be able to outline today the package of measures we are announcing, which has 4 key elements. First, it further protects Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom by demonstrating our commitment to restoring power sharing so that it has the broadest support from across the community in Northern Ireland. I know that I am not alone in believing firmly that the long-term interests of the Union are served by persuading those who might not vote for Unionist parties or even think themselves as Unionists that Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom offers the best solution for them and their children. I have always believed that making Northern Ireland work, indeed making Northern Ireland thrive, is the surest way to safeguard the Union, and I commend all Unionists for taking bold steps to make that case for the Union too. We'll also legislate to reaffirm Northern Ireland's constitutional status, including as reflected in the Acts of Union. So too will we recognise in domestic law, through the vital democratic safeguard of the Stormont Break, that a new Assembly would wield the Stormont Break that the new Assembly would wield, the idea of automatic and permanent dynamic alignment of EU law no longer applies. We will also future-proof Northern Ireland's position within the UK's internal market against any future protocol that would create a new EU law alignment for Northern Ireland, and with it, barriers between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. Second, this deal promotes and strengthens the UK internal market, delivering new legislation to guarantee and future-proof unfettered access to for Northern Ireland goods to the whole of the UK internal market, and ensuring that internal trade within the United Kingdom takes place under a new UK internal market system. Only yesterday we saw how quickly progress has been made, with a joint legal solution reached with the European Union on tariff rate quotas. This solution, to be taken forward at the next UK-EU Joint Committee, would ensure that Northern Ireland traders can benefit from the UK's independent free trade policy when importing agri-food goods, reflecting Northern Ireland's integral place in the UK's customs territory. And to maintain that focus on delivering in the interests of businesses for the future, we'll put in place new structures, such as a new independent monitoring panel to ensure a practical and pragmatic approach without gold plating. Third, this deal will recognise the importance of the connections across the United Kingdom now and in the future. A new UK East-West Economic Council will bring businesses and ministers together to identify the opportunities that unite us across all parts of the United Kingdom. And a new body, Intertrade UK, will promote and facilitate trade within the United Kingdom, recognising that whilst international trade is important, so too is the vital trade that occurs within our internal market. And finally, this deal will help put Northern Ireland's public services on a sustainable footing, with funding totalling over £3 billion to support public services in Northern Ireland, providing a solid foundation for the Executive to deliver better outcomes in the day-to-day lives of the people in Northern Ireland. This is part of a financial package I announced before Christmas that will help address public sector pay pressures, provide an updated Barnett formula for Northern Ireland now and into the future, reflecting the needs and unique circumstances of the people of Northern Ireland, and give the Executive significant funding to stabilise public finances. Much of what I'm announcing today was the result of a significant period of negotiations between the Government and the Democratic Unionist Party, led by the Right Honourable Member for Lagan Valley. Many of us in this chamber last week could not fail to have been struck by his unshakable advocacy on behalf of the unionist cause. This same determination, fortitude and tact was at the heart of his approach in those detailed discussions. And further to his comments in this place last week, I'm absolutely sure the whole House will join me in expressing support for the Right Honourable Member for Lagan Valley in utterly condemning those shameless figures who have tried to threaten and intimidate him for simply doing his job. The Right Honourable Member is a man who is truly committed to Northern Ireland. He's truly committed to the Union, and is someone who has always worked hard to find solutions and improvements, where others have taken the far easier path of simply criticising and heckling from the sidelines. The result, as I hope honourable members will agree, is a deal that, taken as a whole, is the right one for Northern Ireland and for the Union. With this package, it's now time for elected representatives in Northern Ireland to come together to end the 2 years of impasse and start work again in the interest of the people who elected them. The Right Honourable Member for Lagan Valley was clear this week that this depended on the Government demonstrating its commitment to the Union in not just word, but in deed. And that is exactly what we will do. Today I am publishing the details of this deal, but I'm also laying the statutory instruments that enshrine several of its commitments in law. Those instruments will be debated in this House tomorrow, subject to a change in business in the future with the will of the House, an immediate show of good faith. And once, as I hope they will be, they are passed by this House, I trust we will have the conditions to move onward to see ministers back in post in Stormont swiftly. And as they take their places, they will face massive challenges. But so do they have the tools to grasp them, not least in moving to resolve the public sector pay issues that have been so disruptive. And as well as that, they will be able to grasp the opportunities offered by its unique economic position and the goodwill that Northern Ireland enjoys across the world. And, Mr. Speaker, it is only right that I acknowledge that for many in the community, an important part of this will be seeing Michelle O'Neill take her place as First Minister, following the democratic mandate she won at the May 2022 Assembly election, recognising that the First and Deputy First Ministers remain equal in law. I look forward to working with the new First Minister, Deputy First Minister, all their colleagues in the Northern Ireland Executive to improve the lives of people from all backgrounds, whether unionist, nationalist or other. As we move forward swiftly to give effect to our commitments, I now urge the parties to do the same thing in notifying the Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly to recall Stormont, elect a First and Deputy First Minister and appoint new ministers to the Executive. Mr. Speaker, it is time to build on the progress of the last 25 years. Today, we have presented a plan which will deliver the long-term change that Northern Ireland needs. It will strengthen Northern Ireland's place in our union and guarantee the free flow of goods across the entire United Kingdom. And it's only by sticking to this plan that we will become a more united and prosperous country together. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am grateful to the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. This is a very significant moment. It is our chance to restore to the people of Northern Ireland that which they desperately need, but have been without for almost 2 years, a functioning government. It will also mark a first in Northern Ireland history, when Michelle O'Neill takes up her position as Sinn Féin First Minister in a power-sharing government with a DUP Deputy First Minister. I would like to thank the Secretary of State for his tireless efforts that have brought us to this point. His is a great achievement. I would like to acknowledge the courageous and decisive leadership of the Right Honourable Member for Lagan Valley, who, in the face of abuse, has consistently and persuasively made his case for change while always being clear that he wanted to return to government with an agreement that was acceptable to all communities. I also want to thank the other party leaders, and I join the Secretary of State in doing so, in Northern Ireland, who have with great wisdom allowed the time and the space for this deal to be reached, as well as expressing my thanks to all of the officials involved. On the legislative changes that the Right Honourable Gentleman has set out, I welcome the Government's commitment not to ratify any new Northern Ireland-related agreements with the EU that would create new regulatory borders. This will be a helpful break on divergence. Could the Secretary of State say when the new UK internal market lane will come into being? We will, of course, examine in detail all the proposals in the statutory instruments to which he referred, that I understand, Mr. Speaker, we are likely to debate tomorrow, because we need to get on with this so that the Assembly can be recalled and the Executive established as quickly as possible. I have always made it clear that we believe in Northern Ireland's place in the internal market of the United Kingdom, and that we support any practical measures that reinforce this, which are consistent with the Windsor Framework, which we also support, and which have the support of nationalists as well as unionists. On that basis, we will vote for the legislation. The money he has announced, including the needs-based funding formula and the stabilisation funding, will enable a restored executive and Assembly to give public sector workers a pay rise, which they've waited too long for, start to tackle the huge challenges facing communities and public services, and make the most of the great economic potential of Northern Ireland. We also welcome the plans to defer and then write off Stormont's overspend, provided that the Executive produces a new fiscal sustainability plan. Can I ask the Right Honourable Gentleman how quickly he expects the money to be transferred, and when does he think the new Executive will produce a budget? Finally, Mr. Speaker, as we reflect on the importance of this moment, since the Good Friday Agreement was signed, the people of Northern Ireland have been without a devolved government for over a third of the time. Does the Right Honourable Gentleman agree with me that we need to work together to prevent the institutions from collapsing again in the years ahead, all of us in the House? Stability is everything, especially to the people of Northern Ireland after all they have been through. And we all have a duty now to ensure that it endures.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to thank the Shadow Secretary of State for his very kind words, and also for all the work he has done with me on these matters. I really do appreciate the way we've been able to work together, and it has contributed to, to getting to this point, and it has made a big difference, so I thank him for that. And also, he's completely right. Everyone in this House will need to work together to ensure stability for Northern Ireland, to ensure that the institutions do not fall again. It's vital that we all understand the responsibility that sits on this place in this aspect. We are guarantors of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We have a responsibility to the people of Northern Ireland, and in every way we should consider that in everything we do, because this union is stronger for it. Now, just a couple of, he asked some questions on the UK internal market lane. We hope to have it in operation as soon as possible. Obviously, we need the legal, some legal changes, other changes, to have that done. On the money, it will flow as soon as the new executive is up and running. And I would very much hope that a new executive will be sitting very, very soon.
Chair of the Select Committee, Sir Robert Butler.
Mr Deputy Speaker, may I warmly commend the hard work of my Right Honourable and good friend, the Secretary of State, And indeed, it's only a week ago that we passed legislation to extend the election period and heard the impressive and powerful speech of the Right Honourable Gentleman for Lagan Valley. And he has demonstrated with his colleagues in the DUP that to lead is to choose and to make difficult decisions. And they've done that. And I think respect and praise is due in large measure to their hard work. I'm particularly pleased that the command paper incorporates many of the sensible recommendations from the Honourable Gentleman for Belfast East, which we share in terms of further legislation to make sure that the position of Northern Ireland within that UK internal market is absolutely cemented. And then secondly, I'm particularly pleased that this paper looks forward to new investment, not just that important investment in public services, but the enhanced investment zone proposal of £150 million, which is going to be at the centre of the way in which we attract new inward investment to realise the huge potential that Northern Ireland presents in terms of jobs and the economy, both here in the UK and across the wider world. It's tempting, Mr. Speaker, for this Parliament now to say, once it passes the secondary legislation, that the job is done. But we cannot afford to devolve and forget. Will my Right Honourable Friend assure me that this government will not devolve and forget?
I thank my Right Honourable Friend for his welcome of this package of measures. It is a package, and it has been negotiated over a long period of time, with a better understanding of all the things that Northern Ireland needs to be an active and wonderful part of our union. I welcome his comments on the investment zone, and he's absolutely correct in what he finally said. But Northern Ireland will never be forgotten in this place, and I hope we're demonstrating that today.
SNP spokesperson Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just say on behalf of my party how much we very much welcome the progress that has been made. We're firmly of the view that Northern Ireland is governed best when it's governed locally, and we look forward to the publication of the command paper. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognise the distance that has been travelled by all parties in getting to this point, but we were brought to this point by a failure of politics around the manner in which the UK chose to leave the European Union. But now that the politics has moved on, it's time for the politicians in Northern Ireland to step up, and we wish the MLAs well in that endeavour and look forward to seeing the First Minister and Deputy First Minister taking their office in what will be a very, very significant moment in history for all in these islands. Now, the Secretary of State describes his party as being the party of the Union, and I should say to him that it has not gone unnoticed in other parts of the Union that Northern Ireland has had for some time an offer of a status in terms of its access to the UK market and also the European market, which is now deprived to other parts of the Union, and I'm sure that voters will draw their own conclusions from that. Could I ask two questions? Could I ask when we might see details of any new fiscal framework emerging? And also, while I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the new East-West Economic Council, can the Secretary of State clarify what role there might be for other devolved institutions in these islands in order to make that new council as successful as it possibly can be?
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his questions and his welcome, and indeed, again, for his help over the course of the last few weeks and months, which has been much appreciated and again helped us to get to this place. He's right to recognise that Northern Ireland is a special place and has a special place. It is the only part of the United Kingdom with a geographic border, with a land border with the European Union, and that has created in the past disadvantage and hopefully in the future advantage for it. But we need to, I think everyone recognises that is the case, and that was recognised both in the Windsor Framework and, as he'll see in the command paper, the various choices we are making there. On the fiscal framework, I very much hope that the incoming Northern Ireland Executive and ministers responsible will be working with Her Majesty's Treasury in great detail to make sure that we get that absolutely right. I've never conducted a negotiation with Her Majesty's Treasury, so in that sort of way, I'd imagine they've got quite tight pockets and are very difficult to get hold of, and they also probably wouldn't want ongoing commentary. but I'm sure they'll make it as public as they possibly can when they can. And finally, I thank him on the point about the East-West bodies, and it is very important that it works with all parts of Great Britain.
Yeah, okay. Julian Smith.
Congratulate my right honourable friend on his patience on this deal, the Prime Minister and the DUP for negotiating such a tough and positive document. The Northern Ireland parties have been incredibly patient through the last months, and I pay tribute to them. And I'd like to again put on record thanks to the Labour Party and to the Shadow Secretary of State for the Labour Party's support of the government's deal. This will be a huge relief to many across Northern Ireland who, whether it's public services, waiting lists or other elements of society, have got to the end of their tether. Would he agree with me that this deal is a significant boost to the economy, to peace and to the Union?
Hear, hear.
Can I thank the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland for his very kind comments. And yes, I absolutely believe that this deal will bring greater prosperity to Northern Ireland. When I was given this role, I was given essentially 3 tasks by our Prime Minister. One was to help him find a route through the Northern Ireland Protocol conundrum, and that became the Windsor Framework. The second was to try and get Stormont up and running so local people make decisions for their fellow people in Northern Ireland. And I'd like to think we are getting there too. And the third is to make Northern Ireland one of the most prosperous parts of our United Kingdom, and I think we can all agree with that aim.
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on occasions such as this, it is ordinarily courteous to thank a Minister or Secretary of State for the statement that they make. But may I, on behalf of the Right Honourable Member of Lagan Valley, and indeed on behalf of our party, thank the Secretary of State most sincerely for his steadfast endurance in our negotiations, for his commitment to ensure we got to this stage, and for not giving up on resolving the issues that have been an impediment to devolution operating sufficiently and properly in Northern Ireland. He will know that on Monday evening, Tuesday morning, our party took a decisive decision to move forward. And when we did so, we did it on the basis of what we know to be contained within the command paper published today. Though we were told that the Windsor Framework could not be reopened, we have succeeded. Though we were told that there would be no change in the Green Lane is gone. Where we were told there would be no removal of barriers on trade between GB and Northern Ireland, we have removed all checks within the UK internal market system, save for those ordinarily required for criminality and the prevention of smuggling. And we were told that there would be no legal change to the Windsor Framework or the EU text. And yet, as part of the process of trust and commitment as we proceed, colleagues will have noticed just yesterday the publication of over 60 pages of legislative change to text on a European perspective that will allow rest of the world products and the benefits of UK-wide trade deals to truly be available on a UK-wide basis. So we are very grateful to the Secretary of State, to the Prime Minister who was here, and indeed for the offers of support and commitment we have had from His Majesty's loyal opposition and the Leader of the Opposition himself. We are grateful for that. We are grateful that we have got to this place today, that we have turned the impossible into the possible. We have turned the undeliverable and we have delivered it in this command paper. And so we are hopeful for the future, Secretary of State, but he will know that our position is predicated on both the full and the faithful implementation of delivering what it is we have achieved. I would be very grateful if he could indicate, in the spirit of trust that we have established and the process that needs to flow, that not only today's command paper and yesterday's legislative changes were published, but that tomorrow we will see, subject to the Leader of the House, we will see the introduction of and the passage of the legislation so crucially a part of this programme.
Can I thank the Honourable Member for Belfast East, and as I mentioned in my statement, he's been integral to what has been happening over the past few weeks and months, and I really do enjoy working with him, and I really look forward to working with him in the future. He mentions a whole host of things. I mean, he's quite right. The command paper is absolutely clear. We will provide clear legal direction to DERA and other UK government authorities to eliminate any physical checks when goods move within the UK internal market system, save for those required as part of a risk management approach to tackle managing risk through criminality, abuse of the scheme, smuggling, and disease risks. He also knows, more than anyone, that this deal is about safeguarding Northern Ireland's place in the Union. We've set out what that involves, and it includes new measures on domestic legislation to affirm unfettered access and Northern Ireland's constitutional position, as well as new structures and steps to ensure full benefits of the Windsor Framework are felt by people and businesses. And as shown by the draft tariff text that you mentioned just now that has come forward, alongside that, we can continue to show that the joint solutions that the UK and EU can deliver under the Windsor Framework. Now, he asked me a very specific question about timetable, and I am committed to the timetable, and this government is committed to the timetable, and I think everybody in this House should know, in all transparency, I should confirm that it's unbelievably important that hopefully, with the leave of the House, we get the business change for tomorrow and debate those two SIs, and that they are passed, because they are a fundamental part of the timetable that leads to Stormont's return.
Teresa Villiers.
Can I welcome the progress that's been made towards restoration of power sharing and thank the Secretary of State and the DUP for their dedicated work on this. I'm sure there will be much to welcome in the papers published today, and we'll need to scrutinise them carefully in the 30 or so hours before we're going to be asked to vote on them. But one thing we know that they don't contain is a removal of Northern Ireland from single market legislation. So will the Secretary of State ensure that the government is committed to continuing the dialogue with the European Union so that we can amend the Windsor Framework, so that we can restore democratic control over lawmaking in every part of our United Kingdom?
Can I thank my right honourable friend and indeed former Secretary of State, one of the longest serving former Secretaries of State in this House, for her comments and questions. And she is absolutely right in all she says. In the command paper, which I do hope people will have the opportunity to read before tomorrow, there's actually quite some detail about what this deal is. But it's a comprehensive deal. The SIs tomorrow are just two small parts of a much wider package of items that are contained within this deal, all outlined and detailed in the command paper. And she'll also see, I think, to answer her question specifically, an important change that we intend to make to Section 7A of the EU Withdrawal Act. So around the storm, and because it now has a powerful democratic safeguard in the Stormont break, that the new Assembly will have immediately at its fingertips.
Jamie Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As the honourable members behind me know, I was married in County Armagh at the very height of the Troubles. And I heard the explosions, I saw the huge bomb damage, and tragically my wife's family lost a number of friends in the Troubles. Mr. Speaker, I served for 12 years in the Scottish Parliament, and therefore I do have some knowledge of devolution. So could I ask the Secretary of State to make it possible that there's a maximum liaison between a restored Stormont, and I say Godspeed to that, a restored Stormont and the devolved institutions such as the Scottish Parliament, so that the maximum benefit can be drawn from responsible working devolution?
And can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, because he's absolutely right. And I also know of his history and his story about his wife. He's mentioned it a number of times to me before, and I thank him for his care and interest in all things Northern Ireland and all things Union. And he's absolutely right. In fact, there is a body, the British Irish Council, that does exactly that at the highest level, where hopefully at the next meeting of the British Irish Council we will have First and Deputy First Ministers from Northern Ireland attend, with all the other devolved administrations of the United Kingdom.
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the proposed legislation, which is of great constitutional significance and yet made merely by statutory instrument and not by Act of Parliament, what restrictions have the EU agreed on their EU lawmaking over the EU single market and in Northern Ireland, and what democratic improvements are being made to ensure divergence and to the Stormont break in Northern Ireland to enable the United Kingdom government to remove or veto the imposition of such EU laws.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? And he and I have had a number of discussions over the years on these sorts of matters, and his question today is actually a very, very wise one. As I mentioned earlier, we're amending Section 7A of the European Withdrawal Act 2018. There is a powerful now democratic safeguard that a new assembly will have immediately at its fingertips on the flow of EU law, such that it is. I also want to point out, and it is actually a very important point, and thank the right honourable gentleman, because I know the work he did to ensure Section 38 was in the Withdrawal Act, and I hope he recognises that there's an addition in what we're doing, which adds Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. And that is a strong addition to that clause. Indeed, his original clause has been a big part of this, of the solution to this conundrum, and I'm truly grateful to him for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the gains which my party leader and deputy party leader have gained in these negotiations, the fact remains that in Northern Ireland there are still EU manned border posts being built, which will create a border within our own country. And when the Northern Ireland Assembly sits, ministers and Assembly members will be expected by law to adhere to and implement laws which are made in Brussels, which they had no say over and no ability to amend and no ability to stop. This is a result of this spineless, weak-kneed, Brexit-betraying government refusing to take on the EU and its interference in Northern Ireland. The government has admitted that there will be divergence in the future, and on page 27 of the command, or 17 of the commanded paper, there's an indication that there will be a legal requirement that new legislation assessed as to whether it impacts on trade between Northern Ireland and GB, and if so, ministers have to make a statement. We've had the Minister of State only this week saying that that does not mean that the UK government cannot introduce laws which diverge from the EU laws which apply in Northern Ireland. What is it? Is Northern Ireland going to find it's got the ability to stay tied to the United Kingdom, or will the government proceed happily to change laws here regardless of the impact it has on Northern Ireland?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and there are a number of points to it. Forgive me, some of the points he made were actually incorrect. There is going to be, we have always said, in fact, in the protocol bill, we said that there would be checks on goods going into the EU single market. I think every piece of legislation has said that we've proposed in this place has said that. But it would be UK folk who are operating the UK internal market scheme. And on this, the 4th anniversary of leaving the European Union, I can tell him absolutely that this agreed package of measures will not change the freedoms and powers we have secured through Brexit or through the Windsor Framework. It will not reduce our ability to diverge, nor our commitment to do so should it be in the interests of the United Kingdom. He mentions, I think it's clause 13C of one of the statutory instruments. There is a whole swathe of things that happen behind the scenes before a bill is brought before this House. And one of them, which the Honourable Member for Belfast East has complained to me before about, is a thing we call PBL, where we do a star chamber of bills, and the Secretaries of State for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales attend that to state whether there's any particular adverse effect of the legislation being mooted. What we are saying is, and what the honourable gentleman rightly asked for, is transparency. Publishing a written ministerial statement when there is a huge or possibility of significant adverse effect to UK GBNI trade, publishing a written ministerial statement is not in any way what he says it is.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate my honourable friend and my honourable friends in the DUP? Clearly this is still a highly emotive issue, and understandably so, because when we left the EU, I was promised, the House was promised, the country was promised, we would leave the EU as a united kingdom. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and as we've heard, they will still be subject to EU laws. So there's that axe still very much grinding away, which we must get rid of. What is unhelpful is the whisperings from Sinn Féin of unification at this highly, highly emotive time. Can my right honourable friend tell me, the House and this country, that Northern Ireland will always be part of the United Kingdom, because the stronger together?
I have to tread actually slightly more carefully on that particular issue, because I am, as Secretary of State, responsible to make a kind of independent assessment of the conditions that might lead to the border poll that he suggests. But I generally can say to him that again, I've got to be very careful, but I am comfortable that in my lifetime, certainly Northern Ireland will be a strong and wonderfully prosperous part of the United Kingdom. However, it is very important to outline the part of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement that allows for all these things to happen, and that depends on any change would absolutely depend on the consent of both communities at the time, and certainly I don't think anybody judges that to be in place at this point.
I suppose it's important to point out that the people of Ireland, North and South, will decide the constitutional future of Ireland and nobody else. This is a very good day for the people of Northern Ireland. I'm very glad to see it. I also think we're about to see something very significant. We'll have the first ever nationalist First Minister, the first ever nationalist leader of the opposition, and I wish them all well. In order to properly maintain this progress and make the most of it, though, Mr. Speaker, will the Secretary of State convene a process with all the political parties in the Irish Government to look at how we can reform the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement to make sure that no one party can ever pull them down again?
Can I thank him for his welcome of the proposals and just point subtly out to him that he mentioned at the very beginning of his question that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement relied on the consent of both communities, and then suggested reform which actually doesn't have the consent of certainly one of them. So, however, I understand the point he made, and I've always said when people have asked me about future reform of the institutions, I think that this is a conversation that should be started and within the Stormont and by the people of Northern Ireland and their elected representatives. Now, the thing I hope for is maybe not that particular conversation, but the thing I hope for is for Stormont to be returned so elected folk from Northern Ireland can govern for the people of Northern Ireland.
Richard Patel.
It is absolutely vital that the democratic institutions and the lawmaking powers are returned back to the elected politicians in Northern Ireland. And today is clearly very, very historic and symbolic. But at the same time, we do know that Northern Ireland's economic lifeblood is linked to the rest of GB. And I concur with the rest of my colleagues that have spoken on this issue. It is vital that we ensure that the ability to diverge and have the freedom to secure Northern Ireland's economic lifeblood, but also the prosperity of Northern Ireland absolutely remains. And with that, can I ask the Secretary of State and this government to ensure that they have the full ability to do that, and they will be backed up by this government in Westminster to do so?
I thank my right honourable friend for her question, and she's absolutely right. And I am absolutely delighted to give her the assurance she asked for, because this will not reduce our ability to diverge, nor our commitment to do so, should it be in the interest of the United Kingdom.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of us indeed do welcome this day and the restoration of Stormont and hope that is possible Indeed, also, many of us recognise that if the government is capable of removing barriers about trade with the European Union, many of my constituents in Walthamstow would like to see them do the same that they're doing for the constituents of Belfast. But can I just press the Secretary of State on what he said about amending Section 7A of the withdrawal agreement? Because he will know that is the foundation of the practical application of the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that many of us hold dearly. And he said it's an amendment, it says in his command paper, about the pipeline of EU law.